In this discussion, make sure that your example is really a comparison of two samples. A lot of times I see students make the mistake where instead of comparing two samples, they're just comparing two items to one another. An example of that would be trying to pick which hamburger to buy when you're at a restaurant. And maybe you would look at which one had the least calories, or which one had the most cheese, or which one was cheaper, or however you compared them. This is really just comparing two items and then making a decision based on which one you like better. The idea with comparing two samples is that there are two different populations, and in order to see if there's a difference between them or to decide which one to choose, you take a sample from each population, you look at those samples, and then you can make a decision based on those samples as to which population is better, or just if there's any difference between them. So to go back to an example that kind of ties in with that hamburger example I just talked about, maybe you're deciding which restaurant to eat at, and you've narrowed it down to two restaurants, and you want to find out what people think about them, how good these restaurants actually are before you go. And so you can't ask every single person who ever went to the restaurants what they think, but you can take a sample of people who went to each restaurant and compare their opinions and see if there really is a difference between the two restaurants. It could be people you know, or you could go on Yelp or online reviews and look at a sample to see if the restaurants are different. Or maybe you want to look at their menus, and I've done this. I don't look at every single menu item from each restaurant to compare prices and see which restaurant's pricier, but I'll take a sampling of menu items and a sampling of menu items, and based on those few items I look at, I can get a general idea if there's a difference between the prices in the restaurant or if the two restaurants are pretty similar in price. Another good example that was shared in the directions to the discussion board would be the weather between different places. If you spend a little bit of time in one place and a little bit of time in another place, you have a sample of what the weather's like from each place. And you can compare those samples then and talk about the average temperature or the proportion of days that had rain or something else. But spending time in two different places, you get a sample of experiences, and then you can compare those. So really try to make sure your example talks about samples and comparing samples, and not just a decision you made sometime between choice A and choice B. That's a comparison, but it's not a comparison of samples.